The teen car crash. Ethan Couch. On the evening of June 15th, 2013, a young man named Ethan Couch got behind the wheel of his father's pickup truck. He was only 16 years old, and instead of responsibility, what he carried that night was recklessness. He had been drinking heavily, and toxicology reports later revealed he also had Valium in his system. Still, he chose to drive, and packed into his truck were 7 other teenagers. It was late, dark, and the rural Texas road he drove down should have been quiet, but Ethan's speeding changed everything in an instant. As his truck barreled down Burleson-Retta Road at nearly 70 miles per hour, he lost control. The vehicle swerved off the road, striking a disabled SUV that had been pulled to the side. Standing near that SUV were 4 people: Brian Jennings, a youth pastor who had stopped to help, Brianna Mitchell, whose car had broken down, and 2 women, Holly and Shelby Boyles, a mother and daughter. None of them had any warning. The impact was violent. All 4 were killed instantly, and the truck carrying Ethan's teenage friends rolled into a mangled wreck. Several passengers were severely injured. The 911 calls came quickly. Confused, frantic voices described the scene: a demolished SUV, a destroyed pickup truck, bodies lying in the grass. Emergency responders worked to stabilize the teens, but the outcome was catastrophic. For the families of those 4 innocent victims, a simple roadside assistance had turned into tragedy. Ethan himself survived without life-threatening injuries. Later, the courts would deliver a controversial ruling. His lawyers argued that he suffered from affluenza, a term suggesting his wealthy upbringing left him incapable of understanding consequences. Instead of prison, he received probation. But for those who died that night, the pain was real and irreversible. It was a tragedy caused not by accident, but by choice. A young man choosing recklessness over responsibility. Compared to what comes next, Ethan's victims died quickly, without lingering moments of awareness. But for others who called 911, the end came slower, darker, and far more terrifying. The teen trapped in a van, Kyle Plush. On April 10th, 2018, a 16-year-old boy named Kyle Plush left school in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was bright, athletic, and full of life. That afternoon, he went to retrieve his tennis gear from the family minivan, a Honda Odyssey. The vehicle's third-row seats folded up to create storage space, but they also created a hidden hazard. As Kyle reached inside, something went terribly wrong. The seat flipped backward, pinning him upside down against the floor of the van. His chest was compressed in a deadly position. He could breathe, but only shallowly, and each passing minute stole a little more oxygen from his lungs. Desperate, Kyle somehow managed to get his phone. Using voice commands, since he couldn't move his arms properly, he dialed 911. His voice was faint but clear. He explained he was trapped inside his van at Seven Hills School's parking lot, and he was going to die if someone didn't come soon. The dispatcher struggled to understand him, asking him to repeat details, but his words were muffled by his position. Still, he pleaded, "I probably don't have much time left. Please send help." Officers were dispatched, but the information given to them was incomplete. They drove around the school, even spoke with staff, but never found Kyle's van. Meanwhile, Kyle managed to call 911 again, even weaker this time, whispering that this was not a prank and that he was dying. He begged for help no teenager should ever have to beg for. The dispatcher noted his tone, but did not relay urgency to responding officers. Hours passed. That evening, Kyle's father discovered him inside the van, lifeless. His body was found exactly as he had described, wedged upside down, lungs crushed by the seat's weight. The calls were replayed later, shocking the nation. A boy had described his situation with heartbreaking clarity, and the system that was supposed to save him had failed. His death was not instant, not merciful. It was slow suffocation, with every shallow gasp pushing him closer to the edge. It remains one of the most haunting failures of emergency response in recent memory. The Bronx apartment fire, Carmen Blanco. It was the early hours of March 25th, 1998, in the Bronx, New York. A quiet night turned into chaos when fire broke out in an apartment building. Among the tenants was Carmen Blanco, a woman in her 30s. The fire spread rapidly through the older structure, its wooden interior feeding the flames like a furnace. For residents inside, the hallways became chimneys, thick with black smoke that stole visibility and filled lungs with poison. Carmen managed to reach her apartment's phone and dialed 911. Her voice was trembling, and the operator could hear the panic in her words. She explained that she was trapped inside her unit, surrounded by fire, with no safe way out. Her apartment was high up, too far to jump without certain death. The dispatcher urged her to stay calm, promising that firefighters were on their way. But as minutes ticked by, the situation grew worse. The fire pushed into her floor, the heat intensified, and Carmen's voice grew weaker as she coughed through thick smoke. In her final moments, she cried out that the flames were at her door, that the heat was unbearable, and that she could not breathe. The call captured every second of her terror, an unfiltered glimpse into the reality of being trapped in a burning building. By the time firefighters reached her apartment, it was too late. She was found overcome by smoke, her body unable to withstand the heat and lack of oxygen. Carmen's story stood out because we rarely hear the voices of victims as their tragedies unfold. She knew exactly what was happening to her, and her final minutes were spent trying desperately to hold on for rescue that came just out of reach. Unlike the sudden violence of a crash, her death was drawn out, painful, and inescapable, each breath harder than the last until there were none left. The grizzly bear attack in Alaska. Finally, perhaps the most harrowing 911-related death on this list took place not in a city or on a road, but deep in the wilderness of Alaska. In 2010, a man and his girlfriend went camping in a remote area known for wildlife. What was meant to be a peaceful retreat quickly spiraled into horror when a massive grizzly bear attacked. The man had a cell phone with him, and in sheer desperation, he managed to call 911 as the bear mauled him. His voice was frantic, filled with terror, as he described the unthinkable, being ripped apart in real time. Dispatchers could hear his screams, the chaos, and even the sounds of the animal. He begged for help, but he was far from town, and no one could reach him quickly enough. The bear's strength was overwhelming, its claws tearing into his body, its jaws crushing bone. Despite the horror, the call continued until his voice grew weaker, the signal fading along with his life. Emergency services eventually located the site, but by then, all that remained were his remains and the traces of a violent struggle with nature's most feared predator. What makes this case uniquely horrifying is the sheer awareness the victim had. Unlike sudden accidents, unlike smoke slowly stealing oxygen, here was a man being destroyed by an animal while fully conscious, while speaking into a phone. Each second was a battle not only against death, but against unimaginable pain. For the dispatchers who listened, it was trauma etched into their memory. For the victim, it was an end beyond comprehension, a death that even words can barely capture. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Also, check out my other videos. Lots of new content is coming soon.